Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are here for another exciting episode, another exciting installment of Archive Memories. How do you feel about that, Isaac?
I feel like we just get smarter with every episode, and at some point, someone should be paying us millions of dollars to do this.
Yeah, eventually we're just going to be like a giant brain in a jar. We're going to become the brain trust.
You know what? I would sell out to a corporation and let Jinteki stick my brain in a jar if they paid me enough.
I agree. I concur with that sentiment. So before we jump into the cards, really is what this is all about, and what it was always all about.
True.
I did want to bring up the fact that one of our, perhaps really our only viewer, brought up an answer to the question that we posed on Mimic last time about what the reference on the right mask was, or what the right mask was a reference to.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw that comment.
I did. Said something about it being Queen Amidala's mask, which I hadn't thought about, but it does look about right.
Yes, I would say that is spot on. Upon reviewing pictures, I went and Googled it right after they said that. And I was like, I will be damned. That is absolutely Queen Amidala's paint from Star Wars The Phantom Menace.
So we will take credit for anything you guys post in the comments.
Yes. I do want to give a shout out to this person. Awkward Cultism is the commenter who pointed that out to us. So thank you, Awkward Cultism, for bestowing that knowledge upon us.
Awkward Cultism gets awkward shout out.
Yeah, boy. Alright, so what is the card that we have kicking us off here today?
Well, after last time, we are finally out of the Anarch programs, but not quite out of the Anarch cards. So we're going to go ahead and start out with our Ice Carver, who we've talked about a couple of times in passing so far.
We sure have. Ice Carver is definitely a complementary piece to a lot of what the Anarch Breaker Suite does and did, and kind of continued to do throughout the game. Just Anarchs in general. Not the biggest player in the game, though.
No. Definitely a lesser part of the whole Anarch Fixed Breaker Suite nonsense.
A complementary piece at best.
Well, do you want to go ahead and read the card for the people, and we'll get this show on the road?
I sure will. So Ice Carver is a resource. It is unique. Is this the first unique card that we've come across? I feel like that's my first time saying this. Well, remember, consoles aren't unique. You just can't play more than one, right? Isn't that the weird thing about them?
No. So that's console. You're correct that consoles are you can't play more than one, but most consoles are also a unique card, and I believe Grimoire is one of those.
Okay, well, maybe I'm just stupid. Anyway, Ice Carver, it is a unique 3-cost resource. It is a virtual resource. And it reads, all ice is encountered with its strength lowered by 1. It is 3 influence out of the Anarch faction. Still in Anarch cards to this day.
Well, there it is. Okay, so why then, Aaron, was this card so much less important than other things like Data Sucker or Yogg or Mimic or Parasite that all kind of contributed to the same archetype?
Probably for a few different reasons. Somebody that's way better at the game can probably point to a million different reasons why Ice Carver didn't really have the staying power that a lot of those other cards that you mentioned did. I will say that the biggest reason, though, is flexibility, I would say. Because if you compare a card like Ice Carver, right, which is static, all ice is encountered with its strength lowered by 1. That's just what it does. Constant effect. No weird stuff about it, right?
Sure.
But in that plainness, in that consistency, in that inflexibility, right, when you compare it to a card like Data Sucker, it pales quite a bit in comparison.
Yeah, it's also got it's static. It's more expensive to install 3 versus 1 on a data sucker. It doesn't destroy ice in the end like Parasite winds up doing. And it's also 3 influence, which is a lot, especially on a card that like Ice Carver, that it's going to do you more good the sooner you get it down on the board, right?
For sure, 3 influence is very significant. You're pretty much never going to see this outside of Anarch, right? Have you ever seen anybody influence Ice Carver?
I don't think I've ever seen Ice Carver splashed anywhere. So it's 3. It's a card that's not easily tutored, and so you need multiple copies in order to get it out early.
Yeah, you're going to be running 2 at least because you can't fish it out. I don't even know that there end up being a virtual resource tutor. I know we eventually got resource tutors, but usually they were more specifically for hostage
Connections or
for
things.
connections. Yeah, things like that. Hostage, I think specifically was connections or something.
But what about good old Logos, the universal tutor?
That's true. Logos, he can get anything that he wants, or it wants, I guess. But yeah, no, you're totally right on that. In that, if you're going to be splashing Ice Carver, you're going to be running 2 copies of it. So that's 6 of your influence, half. That's almost half for some, and literally half for other runners.
Right. And on top of that, if you're splashing it, then the reason is because you have the other fixed breakers going on. You've imported Yogg, you've imported Mimic, you've probably imported Data Sucker. It's like, this is all starting to sound pretty influence expensive.
Yeah, so that's why you just run this out of Anarch. And within everything that you can run out of Anarch, or ended up, I guess, being able to run out of Anarch as the game went on, Ice Carver fought harder and harder for deck slots until it could not fight any longer. Probably a few data packs in, really.
Yeah, it was one of those early cut things, right? Where you're starting to build a deck and you're like, okay, yeah, I want to keep all the ice down low on strength. I want to get in nice and cheap, but it just makes the cutting room floor.
Exactly. You slot it in there at first. You're like, oh, sweet, Ice Carver. I'll put this in here. It'll help because it lowers all ice's strength by 1. Right, which sounds pretty good. Because if you look at a board state, right, where say you're playing against an HB deck and they've got 4 or 5 pieces of ice out in the early, in the mid game, which is totally realistic. You're saving what, 5 credits? So that seems right, like it's significant. But with your fixed breakers, you're not really saving the money because you're just going to be spending data sucker counters, and then the data suckers that you're using are just going to end up being more effective than this card ultimately is.
Yeah, I'd call that about right.
So we kind of already touched on why this card is divisive, I guess we'll say. Maybe not divisive, but just not a WoW card.
Mm-hmm.
But should you slot it, how do you play with Ice Carver if it does make your cut? Or you're, say, playing a core set deck?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you run breakers that are going to benefit from the -1 strength consistently. And then you run pairing cards with that. Because the nice thing is that it's, like you mentioned, it's all ices encountered at -1 strength. What that really means is the more often you encounter ice, the more value you're getting out of Ice Carver. So this really favors repeat runs. If somebody's thrown down a 4 strength code gate in your way and you slap down Yogg and then you just run through it for free forever, that's great value. Stack up medium counters, stack up data sucker counters, get in and get accesses, and steal shit from the corp. So playing with this, I think you're generally building around all of the Anarch programs we've talked about up to this point, basically, for really efficient repeat runs.
Yeah. You want to be, like you said, maximizing it's with the value that you're getting out of it, because if you're not running, that you're not benefiting from ice having lower strength.
Exactly.
A Eli being 3 versus 4 strength doesn't matter if you're not running on the server that it's protecting.
Yeah, good point.
Now, I will say that it does address the that when you are playing with Ice Carver, it certainly can address that magic strength 4 versus 3, right? Enabling your Yogg and your Mimic and such.
Yep.
And then also later in the game, when you had some of those the conspiracy breakers, I guess you'd call them. So your MK Ultras, your Paperclip, as we discussed earlier, and then your Black Orchestra. Those certainly see some benefit from Ice Carver. So if you are running Ice Carver, either the OG Anarch Breaker Suite or the new guard, as we may call it, do both benefit.
Yeah, that's a decent shout out, because those newer breakers, they can be quite inefficient if you end up having to pump their strength too high.
Yeah, because quite literally, one strength could be the difference between spending 6 and 9 credits.
Oof.
Which is big. So you can definitely run those cards, or I guess rather, Ice Carver as a complement to those cards.
You could. That's fair. Or you could run Data Suckers like a normal person.
This is true. But yeah, if you're going to be playing Ice Carver, you're going to want to be running a lot. You're going to probably be doing some heavy ice destruction. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. You're gonna play all the cards we talked about already.
Yep, all the cards that we've slapped ratings on up to this point,
except Jin.
Not gonna play, or Worm. Not gonna play that one either.
Worm doesn't even get to qualify as a card.
Yeah, no, it's just a thing in the game. How do you play against Ice Carver though? Like, what do? You see your opponent, they put an Ice Carver down, like, oh god, no, what's happening?
Well, you rub your hands with glee, because this is why you slotted Foxfire.
Oh shit! I can't wait till we get to talk about Foxfire.
I mean, you don't really. Ice Carver it just changes the math if you happen to see it on the board, but you generally don't see it on the board, so you don't care.
Yeah, it's an inconvenience for the most part. I do want to address your previous comment though. You don't cackle because you're playing Foxfire. You cackle because you're playing HB Stronger Together. And you already planned for this.
You've picked an ID that invalidates Ice Carver. Well done.
Yes, or your opponent slotted a card that invalidates your identity, one or the other.
Yeah, the glass half full or half empty type thing.
Yeah, but no, you're right. You just count your credits closer. I will say there's definitely been at least one circumstance where I forgot that my opponent had an Ice Carver on the board, though, and I completely mismathed being able to score an agenda. I can assure you that's happened in my history.
Short, then you don't be like Aaron and forget what cards your opponent has.
Exactly. Don't be stupid is how you play against Ice Carver.
Yeah, it's good advice. This is what people tune in for.
Exactly. Did Ice Carver affect the meta? I'm feeling a resounding no on this.
No, nobody cared. It was only present basically in core set decks. Yeah.
Would you say it's needed for the core set? Would you say that this type of card is necessary for the core set and the cards in it?
No, I don't think so. I think we could have printed something else.
Okay, interesting. Is it in the revised core set? It is. I'm looking right now. So apparently Fantasy Flight did not agree with you.
Yeah, well, Boggs can eat me, I guess. This is an okay card, but it serves a function which other cards are already serving. And particularly in the core set, when there is limited space, I'd rather see other avenues of play rather than more support cards for the same avenue of play, perhaps, that doesn't really need anymore. How often do you need strength subtracting cards that aren't Data Sucker? Let's be real.
Yeah, that's fair. With as potent as Data Sucker is, you don't really need many more. And then the big one that they printed after this, we already had a whole ass conversation about last episode. So
yeah.
Also, to your Michael Box comment, I do want to say that Isaac, his views do not represent the views of Archive Memories. Michael Box, I apologize if you ever hear this. All right, flavor time.
Well, I like the art. It's very classic in the Matrix cyberspace shit, right?
Yeah. Is that so? When I'm looking at the art, This is another one where it's like I'm not totally sure what I'm looking at. Is it that it's hitting something and then there's like that's supposed to be like a weird like little Tron light cycle kind of thing where data is just scattering off of it, or is that like a glass that's cracking? I'm assuming the latter, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking like data glass that's cracking
Is this
is
corroder?
kind
Is
of how
this
they
the
go for
unseen
it.
corroder?
Perhaps a
Is this
best
ice
friend
being
of
corroded
corroder,
right now?
maybe, or is being carved.
That's true. But yeah, no, art's pretty cool. I get decent, I guess. I don't love the Ice Carver art, but I don't hate it either. It's in kind of fair to middling for me.
Yeah, I would rate it a little bit above middling personally, just because I like the colors, I like the visual effect, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it is pretty striking. I don't know if I've ever read the the flavor text before.
Well, no time like the present. You want to go for it?
Yeah, in the public consciousness, there is a hard line between corp and runner. In the real world, things are a little more porous. The corps need the best hackers to run their networks, and some of the best hackers are ex-runners who like the idea of a regular paycheck, but sometimes things run the other way, and someone on the inside makes something like this. Now, that's pretty good. Yeah,
Yeah, I like it.
just a little window into kind of how things work, you know. All right, let's slap a rating on this bad boy. What are we feeling with Ice Carver?
Ice Carver gets a 1.
A 1? That's harsh.
A 1. I'm. It didn't do anything. Look, all right. I'm slapping it a 1 for 2 reasons. One, is that it didn't do anything. It was a card that always made the cutting room floor. It never made it into decks, and it didn't affect anything in the grand scheme of things. It wasn't really good. 2 is kind of the reason I mentioned before, that this is design space that wasn't needed. And that was just kind of proven as the game went on, and nobody ever put Ice Carver in any decks. It was taking up space. It was binder fodder. Make it go away.
Man, this is rough. I think this may be the most divided yet that we are, because I'm not trying to say that Ice Carver rocks. But like binder fodder? Like
Binder
come on,
fodder.
man. Like this isn't fucking Inside Man. Like this isn't fucking
That's why it
access
gets
to
1
global
star.
sec. I mean, I guess. I'm gonna give it a 3. I if only to make up for the fact that you're giving it a 1.
I'm not sorry. It deserves it.
1 is just harsh, man.
Listen, I had a soft spot for Ice Carver when I first started playing the game, but it kept disappointing me. And so now I'm just bitter and resentful. It's like that ex that you just can't quite let the petty shit that they did to you go.
Okay, I mean, I was gonna say it was like a you and your parents situation, but we'll go with that.
Harsh.
All right. I guess we're moving on then. I guess that's all we got to say about that.
All right. Shall I take this next one?
You shall. We thought we had one more card left in Anarch, but we forgot what I would say might be one of Isaac Nyanzik's favorite cards here. Is that fair to say?
I do like this card, but let's get into this. All right, so next up we have Wild Side. It is a 3-cost Anarch resource. It is subtypes Location and Seedy. It reads, when your turn begins, draw 2 cards and lose 1 click, and it is 3 influence.
It is unique. I can't remember if you said that.
I did not, but yes, you're correct. It's unique. Only one of them.
Only one Wild Side. Well, tell me, Isaac, why was this card a necessity for such a long stretch of the game?
Because the party don't stop. Okay, so everybody needs draw solutions in their decks, right? For different factions, those solutions are different. For a long time, Shapers really had kind of the best ones. It was generally perceived, things like Diesel, a little bit later Quality Time, though it was maybe perhaps not as good, but like solid burst cards that got you a lot of options into your hand, let you find things you needed, and comboed well with their tutors, so on and so forth. Well, Anarchs have a couple of problems there. One is those draw solutions are kind of expensive to import. In the case of Diesel, it's 2 influence a pop, and you really want 3 of them. That's 6 influence. That's not a small investment. Quality time is 3 credits, and Anarchs aren't that rich. How many economy cards that are orange have we really reviewed here? Basically 0, and
I think
that's part of it.
Literally 0.
Yeah, that's part of the problem that Anarchs run into, is that they're a little bit poor.
Sure.
But Wildside is a permanent solution to the draw issue. At the beginning of your turn, you lose a click and you draw 2 cards. That's a click for 2 cards. Now, that's a pretty good exchange. That's double of what you get just having to click to draw cards. So it's a solution. It's a little bit of an inflexible solution because it happens whether you want it to or not. When your deck runs dry of cards, you continue to lose clicks, and it's just irritating.
Very sad if you get to that point.
Right. But for 3 credits, you slap it down and you're drawing cards forever. And what that means is, particularly in decks like Noise early on, you're constantly drawing all of those viruses which you are constantly wanting to play. So it feeds, it's this self-feeding engine. Wildside obviously then would start to pair very well with Aesop's Pawn Shop, another core card, and maybe the most splashed card into Anarch early on for this very reason. You're drawing viruses, installing viruses, using them, and then selling them to Aesop as necessary. You would do the same thing with your Armitage code bustings. And when your deck ran dry, you could sell Wildside itself to Aesop. So it was all part of this Anarch draw and play and draw and play and draw and play engine that was just a very fast pace and was, for that reason, I think, really fun to play.
Yeah, I think you are 100% right in really everything that you said. I think one of the big things is that when Noise Shop was invented, I guess, you needed to be constantly drawing your pieces. You needed to be drawing the cards to put on your personal workshop. You needed to have a constant flow of viruses to put onto your personal workshop. And then, your other complementary and econ pieces to keep pressure up in the meantime before you, do the big dump.
Absolutely. And it's a solution to find your personal workshops. That's a 4 influence card. That is a heavy investment.
4 influence card that you could not tutor.
Yep. So you just got to find it and draw it.
So you needed your Wildside to just get through your deck. Now, as the game went on, I think that Wildside just remained so prevalent because did Anarch ever really end up getting more solutions for that issue you kind of described of not really having draw power? I don't know that they really did. Now, they got I've Had Worse, but that's not really a drawing card.
It depends on your matchup, but yes, I'll concede the point.
It's a plascrete in Diesel's clothing.
Kind of.
Not necessarily, not totally, right?
Sure. If you're up against HP, you're going to be perfectly fine playing it as long as you've got the money. Like, the 1 credit is annoying and it hurts sometimes, but it's not that bad.
Yes, more what I'm getting at is that when you slot your I've Had Worse, you're not like, ooh, I'm really going to be drawing with this bad boy, But I could be wrong on that. To me, just the 1 credit is significant for I've Had Worse, right?
Yes.
But this, just, you lose your click, you draw 2 cards. If you compare that math against I've Had Worse, if you really want to get into the sweaty, click compression discussion, which I don't really want to, but just to touch on it, right? It's not only just the click to draw it, then play it, but also keep in mind that credit that in some form or fashion, you spent a click to obtain at some point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the math on Wildside is far more appealing from a draw engine perspective.
For the most part, yeah. We did later get Inject as well, though, and Inject was a strange draw engine. But if you had both it and I've had worse, for the most part, Anarchs did okay with that as a draw engine.
That is fair. Inject, like you said, was a little weird, a little interesting, but it definitely worked.
Yeah.
Now, once we got the Wildside adjusted chrono type combo, all bets were off. Because for those of us that may not remember, that adjusted chrono type made it so you didn't lose the click.
Pancakes.
Yep, the pancakes. Wild cakes, is that what they called it? I think I remember that being a thing.
Maybe. Around my local game shops, mostly people just called it pancakes as a collective thing.
Yeah. Which is absurdly fucking broken to just be drawing 2 cards for free every turn.
You know what annoyed me about it? That particular combination brought all of the degenerate Andy Sucker criminal players, and they all started playing Anarch just because of the efficiency of the engine, and I didn't want them. I didn't want those people in my club. I wanted them to go away.
Anarch was the cool faction where you played decks that you thought were fun and exciting, and you didn't want the bean counting degenerates in the party.
Listen, look at Wildside. It's a party. It's a club. It's where things are happening. It's not where the bean counters go.
I can say that while I can't sympathize, because luckily nobody ever came in really to mess with my party. It was a much smaller party, but I can definitely empathize with that because, hey man, when you're faction, when you just want to be running cool, fun stuff, and then suddenly there's this new thing where it's yes, that's the most effective and efficient Netrunner engine currently. So I am going to import my deck into Anarch. Or really, you're not going to import your deck into Anarch. You're going to go look up Netrunner DB and see, what won the most recent game night kit.
Yeah, more or less.
All right, enough on that then. We've kind of already answered the questions that would be asked here. But how do you play against Wildside? At this point we've really talked about playing with it and its effect on the meta, but you're across the table from Wildside. God forbid Wild Cakes even. What do you do as the corp?
All right. Well, in a lot of matchups, I try to make a tag stick.
Fair.
If maybe if I'm Jinteki, I try to bait them into running on their last click where I've got a snare and try to get it that way. Because then, if on my turn they're tagged, I can sack that Wildside. And with it being such a critical part of their game, and especially if they drew it early and they've continued to draw, they're likely to get, their other copy and throw it in the bin. And if you can get rid of it, then the whole machine stops moving. That big gear that they turn that just keeps pumping cards into their hand comes to a stop, and they slow way the hell down.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point to make. You can't go tag me if you're running a Wildside focus deck.
No.
You lose that Wildside and things are not going to be super fun from there on out. Now, if you're playing a non-tagging deck, so HB, then basically you cry. Not really, though, because one thing that I will say that HB at least benefits a bit from is the Bioroids look a lot better when Wildside's on the table.
True. That's perfectly fair.
So while you may not be able to stick a tag to try and get rid of it like the other factions may, have a way better chance of doing, you may not need to as much because while you definitely don't want them to be having that sweet engine, if they are losing a click, and this is the pre-Wild Cakes, and I guess post-Wild Cakes era, then your Bioroids are looking a little heftier.
Yeah, that's valid.
Yeah, if you're playing against it in HB, you're sad, but if you packed some Bioroids, then you're not too sad, probably.
Yeah. The interesting interaction with the Bioroids is it limits when the runner is commonly going to be running. Unless their rig is very set up, then they're basically going to run on their first click because their first, however you want to look at it, they lose a click at the beginning of their turn, and now they've got 3 clicks. 1 click they spend running, and they keep the other 2 in the pocket in case they have to click through a Victor 2 or some bullshit.
Right. So your bioroids are able to exert a lot more control over when the runner is able to make those runs than if they don't have it.
Right, and it makes it easier on your side of the board for just thinking about how the runner is going to interact with your board state. Because if you're like, okay, they're going to run on their first click, and they'll have 2 clicks left, it's more predictable.
Right.
You're better able to math out what they're capable of doing if you're looking at it and saying, well, I know they're not going to be able to play a sure gamble and then run because they've only got the 1 click and they don't have their rig set up, so on and so forth. So it does limit their options in that way.
Yeah, it makes that space that they have for runs in the early to mid game much narrower. So, not HB not looking too bad against the wild side.
No.
Wild cakes, though, you're fucked. Yes, yeah. I think we've covered wild side pretty good at this point.
Pretty much.
What are we feeling on the flavor?
Pretty good. Pretty good. The art is, very cyber club. I could do with a little bit more like defined details and fewer possible furries, but the general aesthetic I kind of like.
I was gonna say it's a little nondescript, I guess. Like obviously it's clearly a club, but there's nothing that really pops out that makes Wild Side look extra crazy to me.
It could maybe do with like some Anarch graffiti on the walls, or
something a little more futuristic and crazy than like a cat girl in the foreground, I guess.
Definitely less furries.
Yeah, I do like the synergy of the mechanics and the flavor, though, and that if the implied idea is that spending clicks to draw cards, that clicks are like your ideas and resources as a runner, that when you go to Wild Side, the implication, I guess, is that you would go here to meet new people, to network with them, and have new contacts that give the runner new avenues and possibilities and stuff.
Right.
Like that.
Yeah. You're right. It is a very good marriage of flavor and effect because you go to the club and then you get Katie Jones's phone number, and also you pick up an imp virus program while you're there, because why not?
Exactly. So just pretty cool, I think. And then I do like the flavor text too. I think it's short and sweet. I've always thought the wording on it was a little weird, though.
A little bit. Like you can kind of tell where they're going, but maybe Noise could have been a little bit more eloquent. I'll go ahead and read it. Best place to go when you want to get your mind out of the gutter and take it inside.
Right, even like trying to read it, right? Your brain, I think, is like trying to make like sense of what it is they're trying to say. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know how. I'm not educated enough to how you could word it better, but I feel that it could be worded better.
Yeah, some improvement required, perhaps.
But I get the joke. I get what Noise is saying. You ever think it's weird? A little bit of a tangent here, but I'll get off it here real soon. That in all like the flavor text and stuff, Noise is referred to by his name, G Noise Riley. Which for the longest time, because I never played Noise myself, I thought that his identity was like Kate Mac McCaffrey, where it said his full name, with his moniker in quotes. But on the ID, it is just Noise.
Sure. I think that it is a little bit weird, the inconsistency. I don't mind it for a little bit of extra flavor you get here and there, but I think it's fitting with the general Anarch aesthetic to just go by your handle.
Yeah, I agree, because I guess we never know what Wizard's name is, but Wizard, right? He's always just Wizard. Like, we don't know what Wizard's name is.
He's just some fat bastard who trashes things.
Some fat bastard with the power glove, all right? All right, what do we rate Wildside?
I'm going to give it a 4. I thought about giving it a 3 just because, it's got flaws in its game and so on and so forth, but it was so critical and necessary to so many Anarch decks.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised actually. Like I would have flipped if you would have given this a 3. That would have been absolutely insane to me.
Yeah, plus I honestly like this card. I think it's fun to play with, so I
Right.
couldn't do it.
Yeah, it is a fun card. I'm not an Anarch player. Generally, Anarch decks that I've built have just been to have one in my collection to test against. But I will say that when I've ran decks that Wildside, it feels nice. You just playing it fast, playing it loose, boom, boom, lose my clip, draw my 2 cards. I don't give a shit. Let's do this.
It does feel very Anarch.
Yeah, so I agree that I'm going to give it a 4. What do we have next here?
We certainly have something, don't we?
Oh boy. Ladies and gentlemen, we've done it. We're into criminal cards. We are out of Anarch.
All right, you're going to hear me get a lot angrier now for a lot of reasons.
Are you going to get angry? Because I feel like most of criminal's cards in the core set just kind of suck.
Maybe. You're right. I'll probably get more angry at the criminal cards later on than these early ones.
Because I can tell you, what prompted me to want to do this podcast was me looking over Netrunner cards at work when I should have been, doing work. And when I looked over the criminal core set cards, I was like, damn, this shit kind of sucks.
But we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. All right. We're going to start off with our boy man here. Gabriel Santiago. He is a consummate professional, and he is a criminal runner identity. He has 0 link. His subtype is he is a cyborg. He reads, the first time you make a successful run on HQ each turn, gain 2 credits. His minimum deck size is 45, and he has 15 influence to work with. So, Isaac.
Mm-hmm.
Why was Gabriel like a forgotten child star?
So, in short, it's going to be because he had a big sister who everyone loved more than him.
Boy, howdy did he.
Like, Gabriel Santiago has a solid ability. You gain 2 credits for the first time you make a successful run on HQ each turn. Now, HQ is already kind of the criminal specialty server. They get that's the kind of the one that they go after the most. It's their big target. So the identity is already rewarding you for doing something you were already doing. Whether you're making an account siphon, whether you're playing a legwork, whatever it is, you're very commonly going to be going after HQ, and this gets you money for it. That's not a bad thing. That's solid. But there's a couple of things there. One is it's only the first time each turn, and in fairness, it would be broken if it was otherwise. So that's all well and good. And the other part, and the flip side to that is, as soon as the corporation sees that you are a blue identity, they are going to slap ice all over HQ.
Can I relay a fable to you about that?
Go for it.
So the first Netrunner tournament that I ever played in, and it's to my entire Netrunner career, it was the best that I ever did in a tournament. But before the tournament actually started, we were waiting around. Me and my buddies had gotten there a little early. So me and one of my friends decided, just play a quick exhibition warm-up game, right, while we were waiting. I play my next design, and he was playing at the time a criminal Gabe deck. And in my opening hand, I'll never forget that I had 2 hedge funds and it was a large piece of ice. I want to say it was like a Heimdall or something big and beefy. And I played the 2 hedge funds and I slapped the big ass piece of ice. We'll say it's a Heimdall over R&D. Like a fucking idiot. Sure enough, 2 account siphons. and
Ouch.
he's making a net. God knows how many credits. He's keeping the tag. He knows I can't do anything with him.
Yeah.
So
He didn't also happen to slap your ice with a forged activation orders, did he?
it wouldn't have been rezzed, but I don't know if that ever happened throughout the rest of the game. But point is, you gotta ice HQ against criminal. I will say that my corp then went undefeated for the rest of the tournament, but that taught me a very important lesson.
That's your money.
Yes. So the thing about Gabe is that while his ability is good, it's situational. And the identities, I'll say identities, because it's one identity in particular.
Yeah.
But even further identities that came out later in the game really just tended to be better, if not at least more fun than Gabe.
Yeah, he always felt a little bit plain Jane to play.
Yeah. And he's never been bad though. He was always in the shadow of a better, more fun, more effective criminal identity, whatever that may be. Whatever the flavor was in the meta, be it Andromeda, be it Leela Patel, be it fucking even
you know what he
Ken
is?
Tenma.
He's the consummate professional. He's there. He does a pretty good job, but no one really likes him that much.
He's just there to do his job, and he did it.
And particularly in the core set, there were some great cards which comboed well with his ability. You had Sneak Door Beta, which was very cheeky to play. I have a soft spot for that card.
Love Sneak Door Beta, but we'll get to that point.
Yeah. Forged activation orders always feels fun to play. A little bit later in the first cycle, we had emergency shutdowns. Like, there's fun cards to play alongside with Gabe, but it's none of it relies on his ability, and his ability, while it plays well with the criminal cards, it feels all very seeing blinders on, if that makes sense, where it's just everything's all in on HQ.
Yeah. It's very laser focused on HQ, like tunnel vision, I guess, on HQ. Maybe you could say. Mm-hmm. There's just really not too much else to say. There were definitely a lot of good cards that comboed with his wanting to run on HQ, and incentivized running on HQ, which we've already talked about. But at the end of the day, they could be used out of better identities.
Yeah.
Because you're still just going to get 2 extra credits, which is cool, but ended up not being that cool as it would turn out. We really already discussed how you play with him, right? You slot your HQ focus cards, the things that are going to combo well with you getting into HQ.
Yep.
How do you play against Gabe?
You don't install your only ice over R&D on turn 1.
Exactly. And because you really don't play a Gabe any different than you would against any of the other criminals. You just protect HQ. Right. And archives, because Sneak Door could be a thing.
Yep, pretty much. R&D is oftentimes your safest server.
Yep. And even this we've really sort of touched on, but Gabe did not end up having any sort of profound effect on the meta, I don't think.
I mean, I don't know. It feels wrong to say that, because Gabe was always around. But he was never the tip of the spear. For pretty much the entirety of the time I played Netrunner, criminal decks were generally playing other identities. And sometimes you'd get people who were playing Gabe, and generally he'd do pretty well. I ended up taking him to a tournament at one point just to mix things up. And I did pretty well with him. Solid deck. Got some good wins in there. But it never felt like the meta revolved around him. It felt like everything Gabe brought to the table, Criminal was doing already.
So Gabe's effect on the meta is that he set the stage for the Criminal play type, I guess we'll say. He was the base.
Yes.
He was the base foundation of this is what Criminals are gonna do, but eventually the other IDs will do it better.
Yeah, more or less. Or that the other IDs will have other tools is the real thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Have other tools to make better use of getting into HQ, or make getting into HQ easier.
Boy, it feels weird spending so little time on Gabe after we talked about noise for half an hour.
Yeah, two really different ends of the spectrum, right? But feel sad to move right into it, but how do we feel about Gabe's flavor?
Like him, it's kind of vanilla. His art is, we've talked about this a couple times. It's the early Netrunner feels a little bit comic bookish. Like, what the hell is up with his arm? Like, I get it's a cyber arm, but could it look a little bit less like a Gundam arm that someone slapped on him?
So I'm going to disagree with you here. I think that Gabe's arm specifically, and maybe not Gabe, but Gabe's arm looks cool in his core set art, and I don't like that they made it so kind of lame in a lot of the other arts that he's depicted in.
I'm of the opposite opinion. I think this is the one that looks out of place.
Well, you know what? I don't care. I will say, though, as we've kind of talked about, what it is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't the illustrations for the identities, weren't they done, all three of them done by one guy, and then one different guy did all the ID illustrations from henceforth?
I'm not sure if that might be true. I don't remember off the top of my head, if I'm honest.
We'll keep an eye. We'll keep an eye if we ever see our boy Ralph Beisner again. I guess outside of Kate, But
we'll have to keep it in the back of our head.
But his flavor, I think, is decent. I do like a lot of the cards that he's depicted in later. So I'll say, as a character, I've had a soft spot for Gabe because he's always seemed like pretty badass to me because he's a runner, right? But he's not afraid to get dirty in meat space. He's not afraid to get his meat dirty.
This is absolutely a runner who you could see just putting a bullet in someone's head.
Yes, and in his alternate promo art, he absolutely did that within a very short time span of the art of the event that the art depicts.
Indeed.
So, what do we rate Gabe? What do we rate old Gabe?
I'm going to give him a very vanilla 3 stars. He's a solid identity. He stayed around, but he didn't change much. He didn't impact that much, and he wasn't that interesting.
I will agree with the 3. I was on the verge of giving him a 2, but I think 2 is just too harsh. 2 is just too harsh. He's good. He's very clearly not bad. Just because he's outshined by better runners doesn't mean that he's bad. And that's a problem that I think that's a conundrum that many cards ended up facing in Netrunner, and that we'll definitely talk about. That there are so many cards, identities, whatever in this game that are not bad. It's just there's something a little better,
as is common for any card game.
Yeah, I mean any game, right?
Sure.
Okie dokie.
Oh boy, can I take this one? Can I please take this one?
I'll be nice and let you take this one.
Oh boy, here we go. Okay, next up we have the first of the criminal events. It is Account Siphon. It is a run event, Sabotage. Its text reads, make a run on HQ. If successful, instead of accessing cards, you may force the corp to lose up to 5 credits. Then you gain 2 credits for each credit lost and take 2 tags. It costs 0 credits to play, and 4 influence to splash. Whew. Okay.
Yikes.
All right, Aaron. Why did this card maybe make the community in general saltier than any other?
To borrow a phrase used by Hayao Miyazaki, Account Siphon was a mistake. You and I have gone rounds. You and I have gone years of boxing matches worth of rounds back and forth about Account Siphon, its place in the game, its relative power, things like that. And I maintain that Account Siphon was, and up until its removal from the game, all the way up until its removal from the game, I mean, like, just too fucking good. Like, it's just too good. It's busted. It's broken. It's not cool. It's not okay. It's not fun. I mean, like, yeah, okay, it's Account Siphon, fun to play against somebody sometimes, until eventually, you've played so many of them, you're just dead inside and you're a bioroid. You're a bioroid just playing Account Siphons.
I feel personally attacked.
You're just a fucking bioroid just playing Account Siphon. You've got the fucking Matrix code just covering your eyes, just analyzing when the most optimal second of the game to be a complete dickhead is to slap this card on the table. Like,
beep boop. What is love? Must acquire credits.
Scanning table. All right, no, this it's just Account Siphon may have rendered me speechless just in thinking back on it, because whose idea was this to make this card? and it's a card, I will say, in Lucas's Fantasy Flight, Christian Peterson, Richard Garfield, Garfield the cat, in all of their defense, this card was not that bad in the core set and in the context of the core set. This is one of those emergent cards that, as more and more things were printed and as more and more gears turned and pieces were added, just got to be more and more of a problem. Specifically, recursion. It additionally, ice just becoming less and less of a big deal, and things like that. It's one of those cards that I think either lacked foresight, or I think they must have fucking printed a lot of cards, and where they just like sent them to the printers, and then they were like looking through their card binder and they saw Account Siphon and they'd be like, "Oh shit, that's right, that's a card."
All right. So now that you've had your little rant, allow me to retort. Okay. On the surface, I will agree that Account Siphon was too strong. You're talking about a 15 credit swing. And
15, 1-5.
Yeah, 1-5. Enormous. This is frankly a ridiculous credit swing. So could I see knocking it down to something like 4 credits and gaining 2, or 5 credits and gaining 1, and then maybe only taking 1 tag, something like that? Yes, it could have been tuned better. Maybe it could have even cost something to play it or something, so that there was something more that the runner had to invest right at the start of it, rather than just, oh, I'm just going to play Account Siphon and click through your Eli, and now you're broke and I'm rich. Sure, could have been tuned better. But the concept of this card is correct and something needed for the game. Because what the game does best, we've talked about this too, is interaction between the corp and the runner. And what this card is heavy on is interaction. Let's go over this a little bit. For one, you're forcing the corporation to lose 5 credits. This is letting you attack something about the corp's board state that is normally not available to attack. You're able to do direct economic damage to the corporation. That's interesting, and that opens up other avenues of play. If you drain them of critical money that they needed, and then you run R&D for a deep dig, or you run the remote server while they're unable to res ice, that's an interesting interaction. You can argue about it not being fun, maybe, fine, whatever, but it's certainly interactive, and you're having to make a run in order to make that happen. You're gaining money for doing so. So it's a credit swing. You're basically making a run with the intention of creating a credit differential between you and the corporation. I like that effect. Then you have to take 2 tags. Now that's also interesting. Tags are interactive. Now later on, the runner managed to get some cards. The runners managed to get some cards that actually incentivize tags, but for the most part, tags have always been a negative thing, in that all they're doing is meaning that the corp knows where you are. They can play Scorched Earth on you. They can play All-Seeing Eye or whatever. Basically, they can destroy your resources. They can blow up your house. So it's risky. So if you want to float those tags and maintain the whole of that credit advantage, it's an investment. If you don't want to float those tags, if you're up against Wayland and you're like, I can't just sit here tagged all the time, then you have to spend a click and 2 credits to dump each of those tags, which counteracts the effect of it. It feels like Account Siphon was primarily balanced around the idea that the runner would have to remove those tags. What happened later on was the runner didn't have to remove those tags, and they would just float them forever. And I am personally guilty of playing endless decks that did exactly that, because when you just don't care about the tags, it's an extremely potent effect.
So, I'm going to address a few things that you said.
Okay.
I'm going to kind of go in order, of my memory of, how you ordered.
Get your notebook out, yeah.
Right. So, first and foremost, I will agree completely, actually. Not even, reluctantly. I completely agree that the effect of Account Siphon and what it does, kind of the sucking the credits and putting them in your cyber wallet is needed. It is a necessary effect. It should be in the game and should have been in the game from the start. Okay, let me be very clear on that.
Okay.
But the math on Account Siphon fucking sucks. Like, dude, it's not even close. Like, 15 credit swing? Are you shitting me? Like, I get that, okay, they're tagged, they have to remove the tags, whatever. But as you discussed, and you and I both know, the game got to a point, and I don't even think it really took all that long to get there, where runners, for the most part, didn't have to worry about tags. Honestly, and this may be a bold claim, but I would say for a pretty good chunk, at least in the early game, Wayland Tag and Bag decks were basically good because Account Siphon was a card.
I mean, partially.
Yeah, well, partially. Obviously, they had steps and resources to proactively tag. Not trying to say that wasn't a thing, or even Tag and Bag outside of NBN was absolutely viable, whether you were playing against somebody with Account Siphon or not. But boy, was it probably nice to just play a deck that basically didn't have to worry about Account Siphon. Because it's like, alright, you're going to play Account Siphon, which, okay, you're going to suck my money, but Wayland, chances are I'm rich regardless. And 2, you best be removing those tags, or I'm going to fucking kill you.
Yeah, there's certainly that.
And then really NBN could play a pretty adjacent strategy, without much issue.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. So the math sucks, and it needs to just be different. Even, and this may be crazy because this is going to address, kind of an issue that I'm about to bring up here. But to segue into it and to preface it, I think even Account Siphon, you could change none of the numbers on it, and it would be fine if it read, if successful, and you have not made another, if successful, and it was your first successful run on HQ, boom, do the effect.
Basically, just to invalidate repeat siphons on one turn.
If you could just siphon once per turn. I think now some people, may jump and be like, well, no, then it would be shitty. Then, it wouldn't be good at that point. But I think it would. I think it would be completely fine.
I think you're right. I would still have run this if I could only do it once per turn.
But as you mentioned, was that, this card, the base of this card is that it forces interaction. It fosters interaction, yada, yada. If I get Account Siphon fucking 6 times in a row to 0 credits and I literally cannot play the fucking game, we're not interacting.
There's a certain amount of truth to what you're saying, yes.
You are not interacting with my board state. I'm not interacting with your board state. You are just sucking my money off every turn, and there's nothing I can do about it, and then I lose, basically. Now, obviously, get good, yada yada, whatever. But this is coming from the perspective of somebody, who played a deck without. I don't want to imply that, playing other deck archetypes is like a negative thing or anything, but I played HB decks with no gimmicks. My type of preferred corp play style was to play ice, defend my servers, and score agendas, and stop the runner from
play the scoring window game.
Yeah, play the scoring window game, protect my servers. There were no gimmicks about it. So, will I say that the type of corp that I enjoyed playing was particularly susceptible to Account Siphon? Sure. But I think that not necessarily invalidating, but really shitting quite heavily on the base, almost foundational Netrunner Corporation playstyle is not good design.
Perhaps. And I think in that respect, it's more of an issue of the card being too strong, but in the right space. Because I think without a solution like this, then perhaps your favorite archetype becomes too strong, that you just end up putting the runner through the ringer as far as making them pay over and over and over again, and the scoring windows then become very easy to predict and you can time them much better. I think Account Siphon serves a purpose as far as that's concerned.
Sure.
And I'm going to say it, playing Tag Me is really fun. You just live your life on the fucking edge. You just accept the risk that maybe they're going to be able to blow you up, and you try to include some cards to play around it, but you just throw 2 middle fingers in the air and you hit the accelerator.
Sure. I mean, I'll concede both those points, but I mean, less so on the second one, because like I had mentioned, or I guess not like I had mentioned, like we had sort of touched on earlier, playing Tag Me got to a point where it really wasn't that exciting. It really wasn't that scary. Running Tag Me was like, once we had fucking Sports Hopper, like, fuck, who gives a shit, man?
I think Jaganu Mercs was the one that really made it uncool, but
Sports Hopper definitely helped the Tag Me archetype, though.
Okay.
I do want to point one other thing out, though, because I don't want to be painted in an incorrect light here. Again, I want to repeat, I do think that this card needs to exist in some way. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be a econ denial or even direct econ sabotage ability for the runner to have. I do agree that if there's no way for the runner to do the sucky to the corpse money, so to speak, then maybe just walling up behind ice and getting super stout with your servers and scoring out would be too strong. I just think that it needs to be different.
Perhaps.
But anyway, continue.
All right. How do you play with this card?
Well, there are many different ways to play with this card as the game evolved and went on. In the core set, I mean, really, you just ran the 3 that you had. You waited for a good opportunity where Account Siphon was at its best when you and the Corp were on what seemed to be pretty even footing,
Mm-hmm.
and the Corp feels pretty safe about that, right? Because if you and me and the runner are sitting on even footing, right, then I feel like I'm, maybe only, one more ice, one more this, that, or the other away from being able to score that remote, score out of that remote, or, you know, biotic, or without totally bankrupting myself, whatever that condition is that you're waiting for that opportunity for. Um, and when the runner is on even footing, right, you know that, okay, I'm on a timer here. Me and the Corp are kind of even in the game. I would say that in Netrunner as a game, the pressure is on you as the runner, right? Because the Corp's going to advance their game plan, and they're going to have more control over that.
Right.
And you're going to be playing reactionary, right? So when you know that you and the Corp are on kind of even ground, they're probably closer to their goal than you are to yours. So then Account Siphon comes in, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
play this, and now suddenly the game is not just in my favor, but it's likely way in my favor.
Yeah.
At least from
Yeah.
an economic perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. That's basically its purpose.
This is a card that when the game's on the fence, flips it in your favor. And as the game went on, how you would play with it would ramp up eventually to, okay, core set, you only got 3 of them, hold on to them for the right moment. You can't play it when you're too poor, but, is it looking especially enticing when you're, super rich and the corp is poor? Right? You want to play it in that kind of middle ground. You really want to hit them with it at the right moment. So that's kind of how you played with it in the early portions of the game. Now, once we get into being able to recur it a whole bunch, because really your only option for recurring it was Deja Vu in the core set, and we kind of discussed some of the limitations of that already. But
Mhm.
once we got things like Same Old Thing, Larla, Levy AR Lab access, uh,
Sure.
it became quite a bit easier to, for lack of a better term, play the shit out of this card. So the way you played it in that kind of landscape of the game was once you kind of cracked that path into HQ to where you could eke that first one in, you just keep playing them, just keep playing them. Don't let the corp have any money ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. Seems right. I mean, when you're talking about having all of those, when you've got 3 account siphons, 3 same old things, if you're a degenerate anarch tag me deck like me, 3 deja vus as well, that's 9 account siphons. Throw in a Levy AR, now you've got 18 account siphons.
Yep. And that's just kind of what you do. You wait for the perfect time, really, but then once, well, this feels like the kind of card where once you're able to get that crack in there, then the dam opens up,
Mm-hmm. Yep, very much
and
so.
the corp just gets taken to the sadness city.
All right, then. How do we play around it?
This, I feel, is a little bit more of an interesting question, and we've kind of touched on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Account Siphon was a card that you definitely had to play around. If you played Netrunner for any extended period of time, almost, I guess, unless it was after this, Praise be to Boggs rotated out, then you were playing around this card in some form or fashion. How you choose to do that, though, there were a few different ways. Given how much I hate this card and my complaints about it earlier in this discussion, I don't necessarily want to imply that Account Siphon was, insurmountable. Because even at its most, cancerous, terrible, unfun, you could still work around it if you were nuanced enough to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? Well, like we talked about, Wayland, if this was kind of earlier in the early mid portion of the game, Account Siphon scared you probably the least of the four corp factions. Is that fair to say?
I think that's probably fair to say. Yeah.
For two reasons. You want them to take tags, so chances are, again, unless this was later in the game's life cycle, once they took those tags, they were going to clear them, or they were going to die. So you're good with that. You have in faction very easy Account Siphon recovery tools. The what I think is very underrated Beanstalk royalties, especially out of base Wayland.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Laughs in Account Siphon's face. Oh, I have no credits. Oh, actually, I have 4 now. Depending on what my board state is, I can click for another 2. Okay, I'm fine again. Even if they, take a turn to click up and they have a hostile takeover in hand, just they had a lot of ways to deal with the economic devastation that Account Siphon wrought.
That's a good point as well. Good recovery.
Yeah, they were just good at bouncing back. And then chances are, if it was a Wayland deck, they were trying to kill you.
Can I make a counterpoint?
Sure.
So I think that's correctly how the matchups tended to go early. I think later on the script kind of flipped a little bit. I think the thing that people had access to for most of the game's life cycle, but were not very good at using to play around Account Siphon, was the use of upgrades and assets. Because all of those things are things that you can res in paid ability windows during a run. I found it, at least personally, very effective when playing against Siphon recursion decks to keep my assets in play and keep upgrades on servers. And sometimes those were upgrades which directly interacted and invalidated Account Siphons, like Chrysium grids. Or sometimes it was just an Eve campaign and an Adonis campaign in remote servers, where they make their Account Siphon, they pay to get past all of your ice, and then you spend all of your own money anyway, and they have nothing left to steal.
That's fair. To me, because I'm definitely not ignorant to that very often preached counter, quote unquote, to Siphon. But I'm going to put it and let it remain in quotes, the word counter. Because it's almost like a non-answer to a question. How do you stop Account Siphon? The primary focus of which is to take all my money. Well, you just spend all your money so that you don't have any. Okay.
In a way, that's a valid critique. At the same time, most Siphon decks are relying upon the huge credit swing that they get out of it. So they've just paid to get into HQ, and if most of the time you're going to know when you're up against a faction or a deck that's likely to siphon you, and it's generally not going to be cheap for them to get into HQ unless you drew poorly. So they've spent to get in, and now they just have to make do with a single HQ access instead. And yes, this can still open up other servers where you can no longer res to protect your remotes. You can no longer res to protect R&D if you need to do something like that. So yeah, in a way, you're right that this is kind of like a non-fix. It's like, all right, I'm just invalidating my own board state, but resing those assets and upgrades is still going to be good for you in other ways. Yes, it's a little bit burning your bridges in some regard, but those things still benefit you down the road. It's more like a way to prevent Account Siphon from just dominating the game than it is a direct counter to it.
Sure. I think really more the point that I was, I guess, trying to make, right, is that, so first and foremost, you have to think, right, that if those assets and upgrades and things weren't resed already, then the chances are that, I don't want them to be rezzed at the moment. And so chances are, if I'm rezzing those, them being rezzed probably isn't benefiting me very much.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was going to benefit me, most likely they would already be rezzed.
I don't know if that's true, because oftentimes I would save rezzing those sorts of things for when I could do it to counter a siphon.
I mean, sure, but then at that point, if you're saving that asset, saving
Sure,
it to counter a siphon, then it's not doing probably what you put it in the deck to do. I'm sure you didn't put the asset in the deck to sit on the board and res when somebody tries to account siphon you.
Sure, that's not an unreasonable complaint as well.
Now, I will say that later in the game, because you had made the point that it's not a lot of those decks that can kind of counter them by draining yourself of money, because they really rely on or benefit greatly from the credits that they get from the account siphon. I will say that if we're going to split account siphon's reign into two eras, that's definitely true in the first era of account siphon's reign, but I would completely disagree in the second era of account siphon's reign. Account siphon spam and recursion was not to make the runner rich. It was with the entire purpose to keep the corporation poor. And the whole asset thing is absolutely not a counter to that.
Again, I'm not sure that I entirely agree, because if they try to account siphon you and you've got 9 credits and you res an Adonis and an Eve campaign, those are going to be money solutions for you.
Sure, but in these circumstances, right? So they siphon me, I drain myself to 0. It's one of those things that, and again, I'm not trying to say that this isn't a counter or isn't a way that you can play around account siphon, because it certainly is. I just think that it was, by many players, posed as this very easy, very catch-all fix that, you just have your assets, you just res them, man. You just take all your money and you res them. That's just what you do against account siphon. What are you talking about? And the circumstances for that to be effective, I feel, are so particular, right? In your example that you're using right now, that implication, right, is that, okay, so if I'm running my, Eves and my Adonis, let's just say the implication there is that I'm playing an HB deck. So then at that point, what does the board state look like for that? If they're account siphoning me, chances are they're, wanting to weaken my board state to be able to protect a remote. So do I have that Adonis or Eve campaign in a remote to where it's protected? Is it protected with res dice? If I just resed it, they're not going to keep the tags because I'm HB. So if they're siphoning me on my first click and I drain myself, to res my Eve, or Adonis, or perhaps both, okay, well, especially when they're not siphoning you purely to get the money, right? This is, again, the example that they're doing it to keep you poor. If they have the money to go trash that even Adonis, that's just what they're going to do on their next two clicks, most likely.
Assuming that they have the money to do it, granted. Now, okay, I'm not going to pretend that this general strategy is a catch-all solution, or even that it's easy to do. It's very difficult to do. But I think one of the reasons why Account Siphon fell off a little bit in power, not a lot, was that people got better at playing that sort of thing around it, just due to practice, just due to having so many Account Siphons stuffed in their face, that they got better at using those opportunities to play around it.
I mean, sure. If you get Account Siphon so many times, and that's the meta that you're playing, right? And you want to play the game and you want to play it, at least a sort of competitive level. I mean, you're forced to do that, right? But I think that argument can be made for any sort of degeneracy, for the most part. Probably a few exceptions, but any sort of degeneracy, or just unfun, card or deck design that ended up in the game is like, people can say that, oh, well, it didn't end up being that bad because people learned to play against it. And it's like, okay, well, because people had to if they wanted to play the game.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's fair.
But
Phew.
I don't even know that I'm done. And I know this has been a long, like, fucking noise, eat your heart out. The account siphon discussion. That's what is going to go down in history on this podcast.
And we'll be coming back to it as we encounter more of its support and counters.
That's true. But this is one of those cards where, especially after siphon spam was so prevalent, that, you know, I brought up in the past the Netrunner designers' tendency to kind of panic and just try to print silver bullet cards for things.
Yeah.
This is one where there are some cards that were definitely panic printed as attempted silver bullets to this card.
For certain.
Most of them didn't even work. That's how powerful this card was. Is that the silver bullets they printed specifically for this card did not work.
I'm again not going to entirely agree with you. I think Chrysium Grid was a really good card to include.
So Chrysium Grid was fine. That was the one, that was the shot that they hit. But you slot in Sealed Vault into a lot of decks these days.
No, but I think that's also partially because didn't Chrysium Grid come out before Sealed Vault?
I thought it was before. I thought it was Sealed Vault, and then it was like, oh wait, this shit sucks, Chrysium Grid. I could be wrong. I could be totally wrong on that timeline.
I'm gonna double check it while we're here, so you talk for a second.
Okay. But yeah, there were those are the two silver bullets that come to my mind immediately. One of, I think, the biggest, and people may not even see it this way, but I think another silver bullet card that was designed specifically with Account Siphon in mind was Boom. Because during the Siphon spam tag me era, you know, you would just take 1 million tags, and specifically, you know, Account Siphon gave you 2 tags that majority of the time you would just keep. And so Boom being, if they have 2 tags, you boom them. I think probably Account Siphon was, you know, in mind when it was designed.
Yeah, I think that's also accurate. Oh, and by the way, Sealed Vault was literally 1 pack before Chrysium Grid, so you were right. I was wrong, but they were basically at the same time.
Yeah, they were probably designed at the same time. So the design discussion was like, oh my god, what are we gonna do about this Account Siphon? All right, how about this? And I guess, you know, one worked, one didn't, or I guess worked, so to speak. I wouldn't argue that Chrysium Grid solved Siphon spam by any means.
No, but it gave you tools against it, and Chrysium Grid was also useful against other things as well. So It was a helpful card to have.
Yeah, Chrysium Grid was just good. You know, we'll get to it in 2035. But yeah, I think that Account Siphon, because they were unwilling to errata it and just errata cards in general, it was really weird to me that they broke down and banned cards before just errataing them.
Yeah.
They would rather put them down than just fix what's wrong with them. And this is a card that I think a swift and subtle errata could have fixed.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
But no, Boggs, in his infinite spite, wisdom, who knows, said no, just delete it from the game.
Did legitimately make me quite sad because we got nothing to replace it that was remotely effective.
I disagree, but will we get to those cards? Who knows? But I think we gotta just talk about flavor at this point. I don't know that there's anything more that can be said that wasn't already said about this card.
Yeah.
So what do we feel about the art? So this is going to be one where we disagree, and you know, it might be surprising to hear me say this, but as much as I hate Account Siphon, I love Account Siphon's art.
Really?
I think it is so cool. It's visually striking. It's busy, but busy in not a distracting way. It's very striking on the table, I think. And there's just so many things to look at
It does kind of
on it.
pop. I will grant you that.
And it's not anything weird or abstract either. Just this is just some dude's computer, and he is just sucking money from Jinteki. He is account siphoning Jinteki. This is what it looks like. This is what he's doing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So I think that Account Siphon has great art.
All right, you sold me on it a little bit.
What about function to flavor? I mean, there's no flavor text, so obviously can't talk about that. But what do we feel as far as a function to flavor?
Function to flavor, I think, is excellent. I mean, it's a clear and obvious effect. It's like, on the one hand, you've got the money that the corp uses is on like a grander scale, so whatever's stolen is worth more to the runner. I think that's interesting and flavorful. I think the 2 tags is interesting, where you're saying, all right, you managed to get in and swipe their money, but now they fucking know where you are.
Yeah, the runner that Account Siphon Jinteki, like they're fucking running. They're going off the grid, so to speak. Like,
Indeed.
Dude, like you Account Siphon Jinteki, like whatever pushed you to have to do this as a runner, whether it be like desperation, or just pure fucking arrogance. Whatever pushed you to do this, you better be fucking laying low. You better be getting crafty after you did this, because you have 1 million credits now. But what does that mean when the fucking dedicated response team is on the way?
Right, when you are on the lam.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's great too. I do agree too that and it's something that's not touched on very much, which is interesting. The differential between like the worth of a corp credit to a runner credit.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always there. It's always kind of passively implied, but I do like the direct kind of implication, I guess, that Account Siphon has for that. Very cool. I like the flavor. I think it's great. I think that it has great function to flavor, and I really like the art. Probably the only good design of the card is in the flavor, honestly. All right, what are we slapping on the old Siphon? I already know what you're going to say. I don't know why I'm asking. But
okay, so Account Siphon, I played it for so many years in mostly in Anarch decks. And I love the style of that. I love making corpse broke. I like just burning everything to the ground. I like the
just
fast
say 5.
pace.
Just say 5. Like, come on.
4.
You know what? I think you're bullshitting.
No. Okay, because I think this card was improperly balanced, and the fact that they had to print so many cards around it to try to deal with it and calm it down is a problem. It's a legitimate problem. Like, the effect of this card, I love. I am a huge fan of this card in general. I stuck it in all my decks. It is maybe the most powerful runner card in my opinion. But I'm deducting a star from it because I think that it's overtuned.
That's a fair. That's fair, and I'm gonna say that's respectable, because I think that this card ravaged the landscape of the game for so long. I mean, you said it's one of the best runner cards in the game. It might be the best runner card in the game, just pound for pound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Rarely did we see cards with just raw power. And I am going to deduct a point for similar reasons. I would give it a 5. Like, I mean, if we're just talking about like how good it is it a good card? Yeah, but that's not how we're rating things.
If this was a point scale purely on power, this would be an 8.
Yeah, it's too strong, and that is worth -1 point from me. Similarly to how you had mentioned it. It was overtuned. I think all it needed was a simple errata. Like, I actually don't understand I guess what's the word for it?
hesitancy.
Yeah, I don't understand them hesitating so much to just errata Account Siphon.
Yeah.
It would be an easy fix. I mean, I guess, at that point they're like, oh, but then we have to change the printing thing. I don't know. I don't know how the fucking. Oh, I got to change the base file that we.
It was a business decision, not a mechanical decision.
Yeah, it's like, we don't want to fucking print a whole bunch more of this card. Then we got to print new sets that say the new thing. I don't want to do that. Meanwhile, every card in the fucking Lord of the Rings LCG has been errated like 3 times. But whatever. That's neither here nor there. I'm giving it a 4-2 just because power 5, design and how it affected, and really just to put it bluntly, what it did to the game is worth deducting a point for.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So here we are at an hour and a half.
Blame this card.
And I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Our longest episode yet, only to just be tied. To be tied with the least amount of cards.
It's a big card to cover. This one is enormous.
It is. This is a card that we probably could have recorded an entire episode about.
Yeah.
But anyway, we will be back at a later time in another episode to discuss more cards, how much we hate them, how much we love them, how indifferent we feel about them, because there were so many cards that didn't really do anything and warrant any strong feelings whatsoever, especially here in the criminal faction coming up, but we will get to those. All right, any closing words for the people?
Put Account Siphon in your deck and make Aaron angry at you.
Nope, don't. It's deleted from the game.